November 23rd, 1936, 2:47 a.m., the Gunter Hotel, San Antonio, Texas. The room is suffocating, not from heat, though the Texas night presses against the windows like something alive, but from the weight of what's about to happen. Robert Johnson sits on the edge of a wooden chair that creaks beneath his slight frame, his guitar cradled in his lap like a sleeping child. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling casts shadows that seem to move independent of any breeze. Don Law, the recording engineer from the American Record Corporation, adjusts the microphone for the 7th time. His hands are steady, professional, but there's something in his eyes that suggests he knows he's not just capturing music tonight. He's documenting something that shouldn't exist. Robert's fingers hover over the strings. They're calloused, rough as tree bark, the nails on his right hand filed to points that catch the dim light. He's 25 years old, though the lines around his eyes suggest someone who's lived twice that long. His suit is pressed, borrowed from a friend in Dallas, and it hangs on him like it belongs to someone else. Everything about Robert Johnson seems borrowed from someone else. "Whenever you're ready," Law says, his voice carefully neutral. Robert doesn't respond. He's staring at something in the corner of the room, something no one else can see. His lips move, forming words that don't become sound. A prayer, maybe, or a conversation with someone who isn't there. The guitar is a Gibson L1, flat-top acoustic with a sunburst finish. It's seen better days. The wood around the sound hole is worn smooth from countless hours of playing, and there's a crack along the lower bout that's been repaired with carpenter's glue and hope. But when Robert finally touches the strings, the sound that emerges is impossibly full, as if the instrument contains more music than its physical form should allow. He begins to play. The opening notes of what will become known as Crossroad Blues spiral into the dead air of the hotel room. But they're not just notes, they're a summons, a confession, a warning, wrapped in 12-bar blues structure. Robert's voice, when it comes, is high and strained, almost keening, like a man calling out from the bottom of a well. Law watches the needle on his recording device bounce and quiver. He's recorded hundreds of sessions, blues singers from Memphis to Mississippi, but he's never seen the needle move quite like this. It's as if the music is trying to break free from the wax cylinder, to escape back into whatever darkness gave it birth. Robert plays with his eyes closed. His body rocks slightly, keeping time with something that has nothing to do with the metronome in Law's head. The guitar seems to play him as much as he plays it, his fingers finding positions that shouldn't be possible for someone with hands his size. The bass notes rumble like distant thunder, while the treble strings cry out above them. Two conversations happening simultaneously, neither quite answering the other. 3 minutes and 16 seconds. That's how long the recording will last. But in this room, time has become elastic, unreliable. Law will later swear the song lasted an hour. Robert will have no memory of playing it at all. And then it's over. The last note hangs in the air, refusing to fade the way sound should fade. It lingers, vibrates, and then, just before it finally dies, something else emerges. A sound so quiet that Law will wonder if he imagined it. A whisper, barely audible, riding underneath the dying chord. Robert's eyes snap open. They're wide, almost panicked, and for a moment he looks at Law as if he's forgotten where he is, who he is, why he's holding a guitar in a hotel room in the middle of the night. "That's it," Robert says. His voice is rough, scraped raw. "That's the one." Law nods slowly. His hands are shaking slightly as he marks the wax cylinder, writes the date and title in his careful script. He wants to ask Robert about the whisper, about what it said, about how he made that impossible sound emerge from a 6-string guitar. But something stops him, some instinct that tells him certain questions should never be asked, certain answers should never be spoken aloud. "We should get another take," Law says instead. "Just to be safe." Robert shakes his head. He's already standing, already placing the guitar back in its battered case with the reverence of a man handling something holy or cursed. The line between the two, too thin to matter. "Can't do it twice," Robert says. "Some songs only come once." He's out the door before Law can respond, moving fast for a man who seemed barely able to sit upright moments before. Law hears his footsteps echoing down the hotel corridor, quick and irregular, like someone running from something they can't see but know is chasing them. Law sits alone in the room, staring at the wax cylinder that now contains whatever Robert Johnson brought up from wherever Robert Johnson goes when he closes his eyes and plays. The bulb overhead flickers once, twice, then steadies. Outside, a dog begins to howl, long and mournful, and doesn't stop until the first light of dawn breaks over San Antonio. What Law doesn't know, what he can't know, is that the recording he's just made will outlive both of them. That 70 years from now, people will still be listening to those 3 minutes and 16 seconds, still trying to understand how one man with one guitar could sound like an entire band, an entire congregation, an entire army of the damned. They'll slow it down, speed it up, run it through computers and spectral analyzers, searching for the trick, the technique, the secret that made Robert Johnson sound like no one before or since. And some of them, late at night, listening on headphones in darkened rooms, will hear it. That whisper. Those words that shouldn't be there, that weren't meant to be captured on wax or tape or digital file. Words that change depending on who's listening, what they're searching for, what they're afraid of finding. But that's decades away. Right now, in this moment, Law carefully packs his equipment, locks the wax cylinder in its case, and tries to forget the way Robert's eyes looked when he opened them. Tries to forget the sound of that whisper. Tries to forget the feeling that he's just witnessed something that has nothing to do with music and everything to do with a transaction completed, a debt paid, a promise kept in a place where the sun don't shine, and the crossroads wait for travelers foolish enough or desperate enough to stop and listen. 6 months earlier, Clarksdale, Mississippi, the crossroads where Highway 61 meets Highway 49. The sun is setting, turning the sky the color of an old bruise, purple and yellow and sick. Robert Johnson stands at the intersection, guitar case in hand, looking at nothing and everything. He's been standing here for 20 minutes, not moving, barely breathing, and the few people who pass him give him a wide berth. There's something in his stance, in the set of his shoulders, that says, "Leave me alone," says this is private, says if you knew what I was doing, you'd run. He's been playing guitar for 2 years now. 2 years of practice that should have taken 20. 2 years since he was a laughingstock, a young man with more ambition than talent, chased off stages and out of juke joints by men who actually knew how to make a guitar sing. 2 years since he disappeared from Robinsonville, Mississippi, vanished for 8 months without a word to his wife, his friends, his family. When he came back, he was different. Not just better at guitar, though the improvement was so dramatic it didn't seem possible, didn't seem natural, but different in ways that had nothing to do with music. He was quieter, more watchful. He drank more, laughed less. He would stop mid-conversation and stare at corners of rooms where nothing existed but shadow. He started wearing sunglasses even indoors, even at night, as if the light itself had become too much to bear. And he could play, sweet Jesus, he could play. Son House, the old bluesman who'd watched Robert fumble through basic chord progressions, heard him play at a house party in Robinsonville and went white. Stood there with his mouth open, his own guitar hanging slack in his hands, listening to Robert tear through songs Son House had been playing for 20 years, making them sound new, making them sound dangerous, making them sound like something that had crawled up from hell and learned to speak through 6 steel strings. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" Son House asked afterwards, his voice shaking slightly. Robert just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "Around," he said, "here and there." But everyone knew. Not from Robert, who never spoke about those 8 missing months, but from the rumors that spread like kudzu through the Delta. Rumors about the crossroads, about the devil, about deals made in the space between midnight and dawn, when the world is thin and things that shouldn't be possible become inevitable. Now Robert stands at those same crossroads, the place where he supposedly made his bargain, and he's trying to remember exactly what happened. The memories are slippery, unreliable, like dreams that fade upon waking. He remembers walking here. He remembers waiting. He remembers the sound of footsteps approaching from a direction that didn't exist, from a place that wasn't there when he turned to look. And he remembers a conversation, not the words exactly, but the shape of them, the weight of them. A question asked, an answer given. Hands that weren't quite hands reaching for his guitar, tuning it in ways that made the metal strings sing notes that hadn't been invented yet. "You want to play?" the voice had said. Not quite a voice, something that approximated speech the way lightning approximates light. "Yes," Robert had answered, simple as that, yes. "Then play." And Robert had played all night, until his fingers bled, until the sun rose and drove back whatever had been teaching him, listening to him, adjusting his grip and his timing, and something deeper than technique, something in his soul that had been locked and was now opened wide. When dawn came, he was alone at the crossroads. His guitar was perfectly in tune, his fingers were healed, and he could play anything, everything, songs he'd never learned, songs that hadn't been written yet, songs that probably shouldn't be played in places where decent people gathered. But that was 6 months ago. Now he's back, standing at the same spot, wondering if it was real or if he'd simply gone crazy for 8 months, practiced until he broke through some barrier between incompetence and mastery. Wondering if the price he'd agreed to pay was real or just the guilt of a man who'd abandoned his wife, neglected his responsibilities, chosen music over everything and everyone. The sun drops below the horizon. The light bleeds out of the sky like water from a broken glass. Robert waits, his heart hammering, his mouth dry, hoping and dreading that something will answer his presence here. Nothing comes. The crossroads remain empty. The wind picks up, carrying dust and the smell of cotton fields and far-off rain. Robert stands there for another hour, waiting for something that doesn't arrive, and finally, as the stars begin to emerge like eyes opening in the darkness, he picks up his guitar case and walks away. But as he leaves, he hears it, faint, almost imagined, a whisper in the wind that might be his name, might be a laugh, might be a reminder that some debts don't need to be acknowledged to be real. He doesn't look back. You never look back at crossroads. That's a rule as old as the Delta itself, as old as the blues, as old as the first man who stood at a fork in the road and chose one path knowing it meant abandoning the other forever. Robert walks faster. Behind him, the crossroads wait. They're always waiting. That's what crossroads do. 3 years earlier, Robinsonville, Mississippi, a juke joint called the Three Forks. Robert Johnson is humiliated. Again. He's standing on a makeshift stage, a plank of wood laid across 2 barrels, holding a borrowed guitar that feels foreign in his hands. The crowd, 40 or 50 people packed into a room designed for half that, is getting restless. Someone in the back yells for Sunhouse to take over. Someone else suggests Robert go home and practice for another 10 years. Robert's face burns with shame. His fingers are tangled on the fretboard, producing sounds that are more noise than music. He's trying to play House's Got My Mojo working, trying to copy the way Sunhouse makes it swing, makes it drive, makes it sound like Saturday night and Sunday morning happening simultaneously. But in Robert's hands, it just sounds clumsy, hesitant, wrong. Sunhouse himself is standing to the side, watching with a mixture of pity and irritation. He's 41 years old with hands like baseball mitts and a voice that can shake windows. He's been playing longer than Robert's been alive, and it shows in every note he plays, every word he sings. Next to him, Willie Brown leans against the wall, smoking a cigarette, his own guitar slung across his back. "Let the boy alone," Willie says quietly. "Everybody starts somewhere." "Yeah," Sunhouse mutters, "but most folks start somewhere else. That boy's wasting his time and ours." Robert hears this. Or if he doesn't hear the exact words, he understands their meaning in the restless shuffling of feet, the turned backs, the conversations that start up as if he's not even there. He's 22 years old, convinced he has something to say but lacking the vocabulary to say it, possessing the hunger but not the skill. He stops playing, sets the guitar down gently, respectfully, as if apologizing to the instrument itself for the indignity of being played so poorly. Someone starts clapping, slow and mocking, and others join in until the room fills with the sound of contempt disguised as appreciation. Robert steps off the stage. He walks through the crowd, eyes down, face burning, and no one stops him. Why would they? He's proven he doesn't belong here, in this space where the blues isn't just music but survival, testimony, prayer and prophecy all braided together into something that keeps people alive through circumstances that should kill them. Outside, the Mississippi night is thick and hot. Cicadas scream in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blows, lonely and insistent, calling to everyone who's ever wanted to leave, to go, to become someone different, somewhere else. Robert sits on the steps of the juke joint, his head in his hands. He can hear Sun House starting up inside, his guitar suddenly filling the space Robert had tried and failed to occupy. The crowd cheers. They know real music when they hear it, know the difference between someone who's paying dues and someone who's still figuring out the currency. A woman emerges from the shadows. She's older, maybe 60, with grey hair wrapped in a faded blue scarf and eyes that reflect the moonlight like polished stones. Robert doesn't know her name, has never seen her before, but she sits down beside him as if they're old friends, as if this moment has been waiting for both of them. "You want it bad," she says, not a question. Robert doesn't answer. He's tired of wanting, tired of failing, tired of being the punchline to a joke he doesn't find funny. "There's ways," the woman continues. Her voice is soft, almost gentle, but underneath is something harder, something that's seen too much and survived too long. Ways to get what you want, but they cost. "I ain't got money," Robert says. The woman laughs. It's not a kind sound. "Money's the cheapest thing you got, boy. I'm talking about something else, something you might not want to spend but probably will anyway, once you understand what you're buying." She stands up, moves as if to leave, then pauses. "Highway 61 meets Highway 49, you know the spot." Robert nods slowly. "Midnight," she says. "Bring your guitar, and understand that some doors, once you walk through them, you can't walk back out. Not the same person anyway. Maybe not a person at all, depending on how you look at it." She's gone before Robert can respond, melting back into the shadows so completely it's as if she was never there. Robert sits alone on the steps, listening to Sun House tear through another song inside, listening to the crowd respond with shouts and stamping feet, listening to everything he wants and can't have echoing through the warm night air. He thinks about the crossroads. Everyone in the Delta knows the stories. The bluesmen who went there seeking talent and came back transformed, cursed, blessed, doomed, saved, all of the above and none of the above, depending on who's telling the tale. Ike Zimmerman claimed he learned to play guitar in graveyards at midnight, sitting on tombstones, while spirits taught him fingerings. Tommy Johnson, no relation, supposedly sold his soul at a different crossroads and learned to play anything he heard after hearing it just once. Stories, ghost stories, the kind of thing people tell to explain excellence that seems impossible, virtuosity that appears overnight, talent that defies the normal progression from incompetent to adequate to good to great. The kind of thing people tell because the alternative, that some folks are simply chosen or gifted or touched by something beyond human understanding, is harder to accept than the idea of a transaction, a bargain, a clear exchange where this equals that. But sitting here tasting failure, feeling the weight of humiliation pressing down on him like Mississippi humidity, Robert wonders if the stories might be true. Wonders if perhaps some doors should be walked through despite the warnings, despite the cost, despite everything sensible and safe and sane. He stands up. Inside, Sun House's guitar is singing, every note perfect, every rhythm immaculate. Robert listens for another moment, memorizing the sound of everything he isn't. then walks away into the night toward his small rented room, toward sleep he knows won't come, toward a decision he's already made but doesn't want to admit. The crossroads are waiting. They've been waiting since the first road was laid, since the first man had to choose between going forward or turning back. They'll wait a little longer for Robert Johnson, but not much longer. Some opportunities expire, some doors close, some bargains have deadlines written in the fine print that no one reads until it's too late. But that's 3 days from now. Tonight, Robert lies in his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to his own heartbeat, wondering what his guitar will sound like when it's no longer in his hands, but in the hands of whatever waits at the place where roads cross and choices become permanent. He doesn't sleep. He hasn't slept properly since the night at the Three Forks, since the humiliation, since the woman with the grey hair and the knowing eyes told him about ways and costs and doors that swing in only one direction. He holds his guitar, the one that won't make the sounds he hears in his head, and he plays quietly, trying chord progressions that his fingers can't quite manage, trying to find something, anything, that sounds like the music he knows is inside him somewhere, trapped behind walls of inadequate technique and insufficient practice. The guitar sounds like what it is: cheap wood and metal strings, nothing magical, nothing special, just an object that makes noise when you know how to manipulate it and makes different worse noise when you don't. Robert sets it aside. His fingers hurt. His pride hurts worse. And somewhere in the back of his mind a countdown has started, ticking toward midnight 3 days from now, toward a crossroads he hasn't decided to visit but knows he will, toward a transaction he hasn't agreed to make, but understands is already inevitable. You can't unhear an invitation. You can't unlearn that certain doors exist, and once you know that excellence might be available for a price, it becomes very difficult to settle for mediocrity, even if mediocrity is safer, saner, more likely to let you die in your own bed surrounded by people who love you. Robert Johnson is 22 years old. He has, though he doesn't know it, 5 more years to live, 5 years to become a legend, to record 29 songs that will outlive everyone who hears them, to transform American music in ways that won't be fully understood for decades, to die in mysterious circumstances that will spawn rumors and myths and endless speculation. But all of that is later. Right now, he's just a young man who wants to play guitar better than he can, lying in a rented room in Mississippi, counting down to a midnight meeting he's terrified of and can't avoid, trying to decide if what he might gain is worth what he might lose, if the music is worth the cost. The guitar sits beside his bed, silent and waiting, like the crossroads, like the Delta night, like whatever waits where Highway 61 meets Highway 49, patient and timeless and absolutely certain that Robert Johnson will show up, will bring his guitar, will say yes to the question that hasn't been asked yet, but has already been answered. The night of the crossroads, midnight minus 15 minutes. Robert walks. The guitar case bumps against his leg with every step, a rhythm that matches his heartbeat, faster than it should be, harder than he wants it to be. The roads are empty, no cars, no people, no lights in the windows of the scattered houses he passes. Mississippi at midnight is a different place than Mississippi by day, older somehow, less civilized, more willing to admit what it really is beneath the surface of cotton fields and church socials and everyday life. The moon is full, casting shadows that seem too dark, too defined, as if they're not shadows at all but holes cut into the fabric of the world. Robert's own shadow stretches out behind him, distorted and strange, and he has the uncomfortable feeling that it's not quite following his movements, that there's a delay, a lag, as if his shadow is considering whether it wants to stay attached to him or wander off on its own. He knows these roads, has walked them hundreds of times, by day and by night, going to work, going to parties, going nowhere in particular just to get out of his room. But tonight they feel unfamiliar, as if he's walking through a place that looks like Mississippi but isn't quite, a copy that's almost perfect but misses some crucial detail that would make it real. Midnight minus 10 minutes. The crossroads appear ahead of him. The intersection of Highway 61 and Highway 49 just visible in the moonlight. There's nothing special about it by day, just two dirt roads crossing each other, marked by a signpost that's been there so long nobody remembers who put it up. But at night, especially this night, especially now, it looks different. The center of the intersection seems darker than it should be, as if the light from the moon can't quite reach it, can't quite illuminate whatever exists in that specific space. Robert stops about 50 yards away. His mouth is dry, his hands are shaking slightly, and he grips the guitar case tighter to make it stop. He could turn around, could go home, could accept that he'll never be great at guitar, but might become adequate, might make a living playing at juke joints and parties, might have a normal life, whatever that means for a black man in Mississippi in 1933. But he doesn't turn around. His feet carry him forward, step by step, as if they've made a decision his brain hasn't quite caught up with yet. The guitar case is heavy, heavier than it should be, as if it's already carrying something more than just wood and strings. Midnight minus 5 minutes. He reaches the crossroads, stands in the exact center where the two roads cross, where you can look four ways and see four different futures. Four different versions of yourself, depending on which direction you choose. The ground beneath his feet feels different somehow, more solid, more real, as if this specific spot is the only place in the world that actually exists, and everything else is just suggestion, just possibility. Robert sets down his guitar case, opens it, takes out his guitar, the cheap one that doesn't play right, that never sounds like what he hears in his head. He puts the strap over his shoulder, adjusts the tuning, even though he knows it won't help, even though the problem isn't the tuning, has never been the tuning. Midnight minus 2 minutes. The wind dies completely. The cicadas stop their singing. The world holds its breath, waiting for something, waiting with Robert at the center of the crossroads, waiting for a transaction that might be myth, or might be real, or might be something in between, something that depends on belief and desperation, and the willingness to trade tomorrow for today. Robert starts to play. Not well, not the way he wants to, but as well as he can, which isn't enough, has never been enough. His fingers stumble over the strings. The chords are muddy, unclear. It sounds like a beginner, because that's what he is, a beginner who wants to be a master, but doesn't have the time, doesn't have the talent, doesn't have whatever mysterious quality separates those who can from those who can't. Midnight. The temperature drops, not gradually, not the way temperature normally changes, but instantly, as if a switch has been flipped. As if the warm Mississippi night has been replaced by something else, something that has nothing to do with weather or season or any natural phenomenon. Robert keeps playing, even though his breath is now visible in the suddenly frigid air, even though his fingers are going numb, even though every instinct he has is screaming at him to run, to leave, to abandon this place and never return. And then he's not alone. There's no dramatic appearance, no flash of lightning or cloud of smoke. One moment Robert is solitary at the crossroads. The next moment someone is standing there with him, standing in a place where no one was standing an instant before. A man, or something that looks like a man, tall and thin, wearing a suit that's too nice for Mississippi, too formal for midnight. His face is in shadow despite the full moon, features that refuse to resolve, no matter how hard Robert tries to look at them directly. "You're early," the man says. His voice is smooth, cultured, completely wrong for this place and time. "I appreciate punctuality." Robert stops playing. The guitar hangs from his shoulder, suddenly feeling like a weight around his neck, like an anchor dragging him down. He tries to speak, but nothing comes out. His throat has closed up. His tongue has forgotten how to form words. The man, the thing, the presence, gestures at Robert's guitar. "May I?" It's not really a question. The guitar is already being lifted from Robert's shoulder, already in the man's hands, though Robert doesn't remember seeing him move, doesn't remember the transition between the guitar being on his body and being in those two long fingers that seem to have too many joints. The man begins to tune the guitar, but he's not adjusting the tuning pegs. His fingers are moving over the strings themselves, touching them in ways that shouldn't change anything, shouldn't affect the pitch or tone. But the sound of the guitar is transforming, deepening, becoming something more than what it was. The cheap wood is vibrating in ways wood shouldn't vibrate. The metal strings are ringing with harmonics that shouldn't exist. "You want to play," the man says. Still not a question. Robert manages to nod. "Then let's see if you're worth the investment." The man hands the guitar back to Robert. It feels different now, alive somehow, warm despite the freezing air, pulsing slightly as if it has its own heartbeat. Robert's hands move to the strings, and something is different. His fingers know where to go. The chord that emerges is perfect, full, resonant, the sound he's been trying to make for 2 years without success. He plays another chord, then another, then a progression that he's attempted 1,000 times but never completed without fumbling. Now it flows like water, like breathing, like something he's known how to do since birth, but had simply forgotten until this moment. "Better," the man says, "much better, but we're not done yet." He places one hand on Robert's shoulder. The touch is cold, far colder than the air, cold like ice, like metal in winter, like the moment before death. And something passes between them, something that Robert feels moving through his body, reaching into his chest, into his mind, into whatever makes him himself, and rearranging things, adjusting things, opening doors that were locked and locking doors that were open. Robert plays. And it's not just better now, it's transcendent, impossible. The sound of multiple guitars braided together, the rhythm section, and the melody happening simultaneously from 6 strings, from 10 fingers, from a mind that suddenly understands music not as something learned, but as something that simply is, that has always been, that was waiting to be released. The man steps back. "There," he says, "that's what you wanted, that's what you get." Robert stops playing, looks up at the figure that's already fading, already becoming less solid, less real, returning to whatever place it came from. "What's the cost?" Robert manages to ask. "What do I pay?" The man smiles, or something that might be a smile appears in the shadow where his face should be. "You already paid," he says, "the moment you decided to come here, the moment you chose this over everything else. The cost is that you'll never not choose this again. The cost is that the music will matter more than anything, anyone, any life you might have had. The cost is that you'll play until you can't play anymore, and then you'll die. Probably young, probably badly, probably alone. The cost is that you'll create something that outlasts you, but you'll never know it, never see it, never understand what you've done." He's almost gone now, just an outline, just a suggestion of a presence. And the cost is that every time someone listens to your recordings, really listens, they'll hear me in there too. A whisper, a reminder, a signature on a contract that you didn't read but signed anyway. Then he's gone. The temperature returns to normal. The cicadas resume their song. The moon continues its arc across the sky, as if nothing has happened, as if the world hasn't just tilted on its axis, as if Robert Johnson hasn't just traded everything he was for everything he might become. Robert stands alone at the crossroads, holding a guitar that now feels like a part of his body, an extension of his hands, his voice, his soul. He plays a few more notes, just to confirm it's real, just to make sure the transformation is permanent. The sound is beautiful, perfect, impossible. He's won, he's lost, he's both and neither and something else entirely that doesn't have a name, because people don't talk about it directly, only in stories, in warnings, in myths that might be history, and history that might be myths. Robert Johnson leaves the crossroads. Behind him, the intersection looks exactly as it did before, just 2 roads crossing, nothing special, nothing magical, nothing to suggest that anything extraordinary happened here. But Robert's shadow, stretching out in the moonlight, seems a little darker than it should be, a little more substantial, a little less attached to his feet. He doesn't look back. That's the rule. You never look back at Crossroads. Looking back implies doubt, implies regret, implies that you might want to undo what's been done. And the thing about Crossroads bargains is that they can't be undone, can't be negotiated, can't be escaped. You make the deal and you live with it, or you make the deal and you die with it. But either way, the deal is made. Robert walks home through the Mississippi night, his guitar on his back, his future secured and surrendered simultaneously, and somewhere in the darkness behind him, something laughs. Or maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's just the sound of leaves rustling in trees. Maybe it's just the normal sounds of night in the Delta, innocent and natural, and having nothing to do with bargains or souls or the price of excellence. Maybe November 27th, 1936, 4 days after the Gunter Hotel recording session, Memphis, Tennessee. Robert Johnson is drunk again. He's sitting in a speakeasy on Beale Street, surrounded by noise and smoke and people who know his name but don't know him, who want to hear him play but don't want to hear what he's trying to say beneath the music. His guitar sits beside him, always within reach, more constant than any human presence in his life. A woman approaches. She's beautiful in the dim light, wearing a red dress that catches the reflection of the neon signs outside, her lips painted the same shade as her dress, her eyes outlined with kohl that makes them look larger, more knowing. She sits down without asking permission, slides a drink across the table to Robert. "I heard your recordings," she says, "the ones from San Antonio." Robert looks at her, trying to focus through the whiskey haze. "Those ain't released yet." "I know people," she says. "I hear things. That song, Crossroad Blues, there's something in it that shouldn't be there." Robert's hand tightens around his glass. "Don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." She leans closer. "I can hear it. At the end, underneath the guitar, there's a voice, a whisper. It's saying something, but I can't quite make it out." "What's it saying, Robert?" He doesn't answer. He's thinking about the Crossroads, about the night 3 years ago, about the price he paid and the talent he received. He's thinking about how the music came back with him from that place, but so did something else, something that lives in the spaces between notes, in the silence after songs end, in the recordings that will outlast him. "It's saying the truth," Robert finally responds, but nobody wants to hear that. The woman studies him. "You look scared." "I am scared." "Of what?" Robert picks up his guitar, holds it like a shield or a weapon or a prayer. "Of playing, of not playing, of living long enough to understand what I did, of dying too soon to matter. Take your pick." He stands up, leaves money on the table he can't really afford to leave, walks out into the Memphis night. The woman watches him go, this thin man in a worn suit carrying a guitar that somehow sounds like an orchestra, bearing a burden that no one else can see, but everyone can hear if they listen carefully enough. Beale Street is alive with music pouring out of every doorway, blues and jazz and gospel, all competing for attention, for acknowledgement, for whatever small piece of immortality can be carved out of 3 minutes on a recording. Robert walks through it all, hearing everything and nothing, the sounds washing over him like rain that doesn't quite touch his skin. He thinks about the recording session, about the moment when he finished Crossroad Blues and heard, faintly, the whisper that shouldn't be there. He'd heard it before, of course, every time he played that song, every time he remembered that night at the Crossroads. But hearing it captured on wax, knowing it would be preserved, knowing that people decades from now might hear it and wonder, that changes everything. The whisper isn't words exactly. It's more like the impression of words, the shadow of language, something that each listener will interpret differently based on what they bring to the moment. Some will hear their own name. Some will hear a warning. Some will hear an invitation. And some, the ones who are listening for the wrong reasons or the right reasons, depending on your perspective, will hear nothing at all, will insist there's no whisper, will dismiss it as audio artifacts or overactive imagination. But Robert knows it's there. He put it there, or rather, it put itself there, the signature of whatever made him what he is, the watermark on a contract that can never be voided. A man steps out of a doorway ahead of him. For a moment, just a moment, Robert thinks it's him, the figure from the crossroads, come to collect or remind or simply to watch. But it's just a drunk, stumbling slightly, muttering to himself, passing Robert without recognition or acknowledgement. Robert breathes out slowly. His heart is racing. 3 years since the crossroads, and he still can't hear footsteps behind him without wondering. Can't see shadows move without checking if they're attached to something visible. Can't play guitar without feeling like he's channeling something that's using him as much as he's using it. The guitar on his back seems to pulse slightly, though that might be his imagination, might be the whiskey, might be the Memphis night playing tricks with perception. He adjusts the strap, keeps walking, heading toward the boarding house where he's staying, where he'll lie awake most of the night, where he'll maybe play a little softly, trying to understand what he's become. Behind him, Beale Street continues its Saturday night celebration, unaware and unconcerned with one man's private terror, one musician's bargain, one soul's transaction. The music pours out into the street, dozens of songs competing and blending, creating a tapestry of sound that will be remembered long after the individual threads are forgotten. But Robert's thread won't be forgotten. That's part of the bargain, part of the price, part of what makes it worth it and unbearable simultaneously. His recordings will outlast him, will be studied and analyzed and copied and revered. And every time someone listens closely to Crossroad Blues, really listens with good headphones in a quiet room, they'll hear it. The whisper, the signature, the proof that some transactions don't happen in the daylight, don't leave paper trails, don't follow the rules of normal commerce. Robert reaches his boarding house, climbs the stairs to his small room, locks the door behind him. He sets his guitar carefully against the wall, sits on the edge of his narrow bed, and for a moment allows himself to feel the full weight of what he's carrying. 3 years. He's been playing seriously for 3 years, has become a legend in that time, has traveled from Mississippi to Texas, to Arkansas, to Tennessee, has recorded songs that will change music forever, has lived more in 3 years than most people live in 30, and he's exhausted. Not physically, though his body is wearing down from the traveling, the drinking, the late nights and early mornings, but exhausted in some deeper way, in the place where the music comes from, the place that was opened up that night at the crossroads and has never quite closed since. He picks up his guitar, plays softly, a melody that has no name, that he's never played before and will never play again. It's beautiful and sad, like everything he plays, like everything he is. The notes float in the small room, hang in the air like questions without answers. And underneath the notes, so quiet he's not sure if it's real or remembered, there's the whisper, always the whisper, the price of admission, the cost of excellence, the reminder that nothing is free, that talent this profound comes from somewhere, and that somewhere expects payment in currencies that can't be counted or calculated or comprehended until the bill comes due. Robert plays until his fingers hurt, until the whiskey wears off, until the night starts to fade toward dawn. Then he carefully places the guitar back in its case, lies down on his bed, fully clothed, and closes his eyes against a sleep that will be shallow and troubled, filled with dreams of crossroads and shadows and voices that speak in languages he understands but can't translate. Outside his window, Memphis prepares for Sunday morning, for church services and family meals and the normal rhythms of life that continue regardless of who's making deals in the darkness, who's trading futures for presents, who's choosing art over everything else and calling it a bargain. But in his room, Robert Johnson carries his burden alone, as he will continue to carry it for the next year and a half, until a night in Greenwood, Mississippi, when the bill will finally come due, when the whiskey he drinks will be poisoned, when his body will fail and his music will stop and the transaction completed at the crossroads will reach its inevitable conclusion. But that's 18 months away. Tonight, he simply sleeps, his guitar beside him, his talent intact, his soul mortgaged to something that doesn't appear on any ledger, his legacy secured in wax cylinders that will outlive everyone who hears them, everyone who studies them, everyone who tries to understand how one man with one guitar could sound like something that shouldn't be possible outside of myth. August 13th, 1938, Greenwood, Mississippi, Three Forks Juke Joint. Robert Johnson is dying. He doesn't know it yet. Right now he's performing, his guitar ringing through the crowded room, his voice cutting through cigarette smoke and Saturday night celebration. The crowd is responsive, appreciative, giving him the attention he's earned through 3 years of constant touring, constant playing, constant transformation of pain and beauty into sound. But in his stomach something is wrong. The whiskey he drank half an hour ago, handed to him by a man whose wife Robert had been talking to, had been seeing, had been doing what Robert always does when he's in a town for more than a day. That whiskey was laced with something. Strychnine. Though Robert won't know the specific poison, won't know anything except that his insides are starting to burn, starting to rebel, starting to shut down in ways that can't be reversed. He finishes the song. The crowd applauds. Someone calls for another. Robert nods, smiles, positions his fingers for the next tune. But the pain in his gut is intensifying, spreading, and his hands are starting to shake slightly. And something is very wrong. He plays anyway. That's what you do when you're Robert Johnson, when you've traded everything for the ability to play, when the music matters more than comfort or safety or even life itself. He plays through the pain, through the growing certainty that something terrible is happening inside his body, through the first waves of whatever poison is working its way through his system. The song is Crossroad Blues. Of course it is. It's his signature, his testimony, his confession wrapped in 12 bars and 3 chords. His fingers find the positions automatically, muscle memory taking over as his conscious mind starts to fragment, starts to splinter under the assault of strychnine on his nervous system. And as he plays, as the song builds toward its conclusion, as his voice strains with pain he's trying to hide from the audience, he hears it again. The whisper, louder now than it's ever been, no longer hiding beneath the music, but riding alongside it, almost as prominent as his own voice. The audience doesn't seem to hear it. They're clapping, swaying, lost in the music the way audiences always are when Robert plays. But Robert hears it clearly. Hears words he's been hearing for 3 years, words that have followed him from Mississippi to Texas to Arkansas and back to Mississippi, words that have been waiting for this moment. The song ends. Robert stands up or tries to stand up, but his legs aren't working properly. The guitar slips from his hands, falls to the floor with a discordant crash of strings and wood. Someone in the crowd laughs, thinking it's part of the performance, thinking Robert is playing at being drunk. But he's not drunk. He's dying. He manages to reach the door, stumbles outside into the August night, falls to his knees in the dirt parking area behind the juke joint. His stomach is on fire. His vision is blurring. His hands, the hands that have made impossible music for 3 years, are cramping, twisting, becoming useless. Someone finds him there, helps him to a nearby house, lays him on a bed that smells like mothballs and old cotton. A woman, concerned and frightened, tries to give him water, tries to make him comfortable. But there's no comfort available for what's happening inside Robert's body. He lingers for 3 days, 3 days of agony, of fever, of moments of lucidity punctuated by delirium. In his lucid moments, he talks about the crossroads, about the deal, about the price. The people caring for him think he's raving, that the poison has affected his mind as well as his body. But Robert knows better. The whisper is still there, constant now, no longer hidden in the gaps between notes, but speaking directly into his ear, reminding him of terms agreed to, of contracts honored, of debts that always come due eventually. On the 3rd day, August 16th, 1938, at approximately 8:30 in the morning, Robert Johnson dies. He's 27 years old. He's left behind 29 recorded songs, a legend that will grow exponentially after his death, and a mystery that will never be fully solved. The official cause of death is listed as syphilis, though everyone in Greenwood knows about the poisoned whiskey, about the jealous husband, about Saturday night justice in a place where the law doesn't much care about dead blues singers. But the real cause, the deeper cause, the one that can't be written on a death certificate, is that the transaction completed 3 years ago has reached its conclusion. Robert died as he lived, in service to music that was greater than himself, carrying a burden that no one else could see, paying a price that was established before he fully understood what he was buying. His guitar is returned to his family. Eventually, it will be sold, will change hands multiple times, will disappear into the anonymous circulation of used instruments, its history forgotten, its connection to genius severed. But the recordings remain. 29 songs, captured in hotel rooms and makeshift studios, preserved on wax and later transferred to vinyl and later to digital formats, outliving their creator by decades, by generations, by longer than anyone in 1938 could have imagined. And in those recordings, if you listen carefully, if you have the right equipment and the quiet space and the willingness to hear what's actually there rather than what you expect to hear, you'll find it. The whisper. In Crossroad Blues especially, but also in other songs, in the spaces between verses, in the moments where Robert's voice fades and only the guitar remains, there's something else. A presence. A voice that isn't Robert's, but isn't quite separate from him either. Musicologists will spend decades trying to explain it. Audio engineers will analyze the frequencies, looking for rational explanations. Some will claim it's crosstalk from adjacent recordings, bleeding through from other sessions. Others will say it's the artifact of old recording equipment, the ghost in the machine, the inevitable noise that comes with primitive technology. But the people who really hear it know better. They know it's the signature of a transaction, the watermark of a bargain, the proof that Robert Johnson went to the crossroads and came back changed, came back carrying something that wanted to be heard, that insisted on being preserved, that guaranteed his immortality while simultaneously ensuring he wouldn't live long enough to appreciate it. 70 years after his death, a college dormitory late at night. A young man studying music history puts on headphones, cues up the original 1936 recording of Crossroad Blues. He's written a paper on Robert Johnson, on the mythology surrounding him, on the legend of the Crossroads. He's listened to these recordings dozens of times, has analyzed the guitar techniques, has studied the vocal inflections. But tonight, maybe because it's late and quiet, maybe because his equipment is better than what he usually uses, maybe because he's in the right frame of mind or the wrong frame of mind depending on your perspective, he hears something new. At the end of the song, as the final chord dies away, as Robert's voice fades to silence, there's something else. A whisper, barely audible, underneath everything. The young man rewinds, listens again, turns up the volume. The whisper is there, consistent, repeating in every playback. He can't quite make out the words. They're in English, he thinks, but distorted somehow, compressed or expanded or processed through something that shouldn't be possible on a 1936 recording. He listens 10 times, 20 times, trying to understand what's being said. And then, on the 21st playback, the words resolve. They don't change. His perception changes, his brain finally finding the pattern, the code, the key to understanding what's been there all along. The whisper says his name, not Robert Johnson's name, the young man's own name, spoken by a voice that sounds like wind through caves, like static between radio stations, like something that's learned to approximate human speech but isn't quite human itself. The young man rips off his headphones. His heart is racing. His hands are shaking. It's not possible. It's a trick. Has to be a trick. Some kind of psychological suggestion or auditory pareidolia, hearing patterns in randomness because the human brain is wired to find meaning even where none exists. But he puts the headphones back on, listens again, and again the whisper says his name, clear as anything, impossible as everything. He doesn't sleep that night. He sits in his dorm room staring at his computer screen, at the waveform of the recording, trying to understand what he's heard. He reads everything he can find about Robert Johnson, about the Crossroads legend, about the theories and myths and stories that have accumulated around this thin man with a guitar who died young and badly. By morning, he's convinced himself it was imagination, exhaustion, the power of suggestion after hours of reading about deals with the devil and supernatural transactions. He closes his laptop, goes to class, tries to focus on normal things, on assignments and social life and the everyday concerns of a college student. But that night, when he's alone again, he can't help himself. He puts on the headphones, cues up Crossroad Blues, listens to the ending. The whisper is still there, still saying his name. But now there's more, words he couldn't hear before, or maybe words that weren't there before, or maybe words that have always been there but are only revealing themselves now that he's proven he can hear them. The whisper says, "You're listening, good. Keep listening. There's more to hear, there's always more to hear." The young man never finishes his paper. He drops out of college 3 weeks later, citing personal reasons. His friends and family are concerned but not surprised. He's always been intense, obsessive, the type who dives deep into interests and loses himself in them. He disappears into the research, into the recordings, into the hunt for every version of every Robert Johnson song, seeking the whispers, cataloging them, trying to understand what they mean, what they want, why they're there. 10 years later, someone will find him in a small apartment in Chicago, surrounded by audio equipment, walls covered with spectrographs and waveform analyses, notebooks filled with transcriptions of whispers that say different things to different listeners, that change based on who's hearing them, that seem to be searching for something, waiting for something, using the recordings as a bridge between whatever world they inhabit and this one. He'll be alive, but not quite present. His mind fractured from too much listening, too much seeking, too much exposure to something that human consciousness wasn't designed to process. They'll take him to a hospital. We'll try to help him. We'll fail to understand that the damage isn't psychological or neurological, but something deeper, something that happens when you spend too long listening to echoes of a transaction that wasn't meant for you, wasn't meant for anyone except the two parties who met at the Crossroads on a Mississippi midnight in 1933. But that's 10 years away. Tonight, in his dorm room, he's just beginning to understand that Robert Johnson's recordings are more than music, more than historical artifacts, more than the legacy of a dead bluesman. They're active, alive, still working, still fulfilling whatever purpose was built into them when Robert made his bargain. The whisper continues. It's patient. It has time. That's what the whisper has in abundance, time. The recordings will outlast this listener, will outlast 1,000 listeners, will continue to play on devices that haven't been invented yet, in formats that don't exist yet for people who haven't been born yet. And some of them, the ones who are listening for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, the ones who are susceptible or curious or desperate, will hear the whisper. We'll hear their names. We'll hear the invitation that's also a warning, the promise that's also a threat, the opportunity that's also a trap. Because that's what Crossroads bargains do. They don't end with one person. They propagate, replicate, spread through time like a virus or a meme or a piece of music that gets stuck in your head and won't leave. Robert Johnson went to the Crossroads and came back with talent and a curse, with the ability to play like no one else and the certainty that he'd die young. But he also came back with something that would outlive him, that would use his recordings as a vector, that would continue to reach out to listeners decades after his death. offering the same deal, the same bargain, the same exchange of everything you are for everything you might become. The young man in the dorm room doesn't understand this yet, but he will. He's already begun the process, already taken the first step, already demonstrated that he can hear what others can't. And once you've heard the whisper, once you've acknowledged its existence, it's very difficult to stop listening. He plays the song again. The whisper is there, constant and patient, saying his name, saying other things he can't quite pass yet, saying things that will become clear over time, over repeated listenings, over the slow erosion of the barriers between what's possible and what's recorded, what's real and what's transmitted through guitar strings and a dead man's voice. Outside his dorm window, the campus is quiet. It's 3 a.m. Normal people are sleeping, dreaming normal dreams, living normal lives. But in this small room, lit only by the glow of a computer screen, something abnormal is happening. Something that connects across 70 years, across the gap between life and death, across the boundary between the world where transactions happen in daylight with witnesses and contracts, and the world where transactions happen at crossroads at midnight with nothing but a guitar and a hunger for excellence that's stronger than the instinct for survival. The young man listens, the whisper speaks. And the deal, the one Robert Johnson made in 1933, continues to propagate, continues to seek new listeners, new musicians, new desperate souls who want something badly enough to risk everything, to sacrifice everything, to stand at their own metaphorical crossroads and say yes to a question they don't fully understand, from a voice they can't quite identify. This is the legacy of Crossroad Blues. Not just the music, though the music is extraordinary, though the guitar work is still studied and the vocal delivery is still revered, but the other legacy, the hidden one, the one that only reveals itself to certain listeners in certain moments, when the barriers are thin and the willingness to hear is strong. The whisper continues. It's always continuing. It's part of the recording now, woven into the fabric of the sound itself, inseparable from the music that Robert Johnson created in a San Antonio hotel room on a November night in 1936. And somewhere, in whatever place crossroads connect to, in whatever realm the figure in the suit inhabits, there's satisfaction. The bargain is still working. The investment is still paying dividends. The music continues to do what it was designed to do: spread, propagate, invite, entrap, transform, destroy, and elevate. All from one man with one guitar, standing at the intersection of 2 dirt roads in Mississippi, choosing talent over safety, choosing excellence over longevity, choosing to become a legend while simultaneously guaranteeing he wouldn't live long enough to appreciate the legend he'd become. Present day, a recording studio in Brooklyn. A young musician, 24 years old, talented but not extraordinary, puts on headphones to listen to reference tracks. She's been studying blues guitar, trying to understand the techniques, trying to incorporate them into her own music. Someone mentioned Robert Johnson, said his recordings were essential listening for anyone serious about guitar. She queues up Crossroad Blues on her streaming service. She's heard of Robert Johnson, knows the basics of his story, the mythology, the legend, but she's never actually listened to his recordings, has been too focused on contemporary music, on making her own sound, on building a career in an industry that's already overcrowded with people who are talented but not extraordinary. The song begins. She's struck immediately by how full it sounds, how much Robert is doing with just one guitar, how his voice and his playing intertwine to create something that sounds like it should require multiple musicians. She makes mental notes about technique, about finger-picking patterns, about the way he uses his thumb to create a bass line while his fingers handle melody. The song ends. She's about to move on to the next track when she hears it. Faint, almost buried in the final decay of the guitar strings, there's something else. She rewinds, listens again, turns up the volume. The whisper. But what she hears isn't her name. What she hears is an invitation, a question, a possibility. Do you want to play? The same question asked at the Crossroads 87 years ago. The same invitation that's been extended to countless listeners over the decades, transmitted through wax and vinyl and digital files, reaching across time and distance to find the ones who are desperate enough, hungry enough, willing enough. She takes off the headphones. Her hands are shaking slightly. It's just suggestion, she tells herself. Just the power of the legend, the mythology, her own desire for success, creating patterns in random noise. But she puts the headphones back on, listens again. The whisper is clearer now, more insistent, and underneath the question is an answer, or the promise of an answer, or at least the location where answers can be found. She doesn't go to a physical crossroads. She's in Brooklyn, not Mississippi. The world has changed in 87 years. But crossroads aren't really about location, are they? They're about decision points, about moments where you choose one path and abandon all others, about willingness to trade what you have for what you might become. She picks up her guitar, starts to play Crossroad Blues, trying to copy what Robert did, trying to find the spaces where the magic happens, where one instrument becomes many, where talent transforms into something that transcends talent. Her playing is adequate. Not bad, not great, just adequate. The same level she's been at for 3 years, despite practice, despite dedication, despite the hunger that keeps her playing when she should be sleeping, when she should be doing anything else that might lead to a more stable future. But as she plays, she feels something shift. Her fingers begin to find positions they've never found before. The sound coming from her guitar becomes fuller, richer, more resonant. It's subtle at first, easy to dismiss as imagination or wishful thinking. But with each repetition, it becomes more pronounced, more undeniable. She plays for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3. When she finally stops, when her fingers are cramping and her back is aching from hunching over the guitar, she realizes that something has changed. She picks up her phone, records herself playing a simple blues progression. The sound is different, better. Not just incrementally better, but dramatically, impossibly better. The kind of improvement that should take years, not hours. The kind of transformation that doesn't happen through normal practice, normal dedication, normal human progression. She should be excited. This is what she's wanted, what she's worked for, what she's dreamed about in moments of frustration when her playing refuses to match her ambition. But instead of excitement, she feels a creeping sense of unease, of dread, of understanding that she's crossed some threshold without quite meaning to, without fully understanding what she was doing. She plays Crossroad Blues again, listens to the ending. The whisper is there, but now it's saying something different. Not an invitation anymore, a confirmation, an acknowledgement, a reminder that some transactions don't require formal agreements, don't need signatures on physical contracts. Sometimes all it takes is hearing the question and acting on it, demonstrating your willingness through behavior rather than words. The young musician will continue to improve. Over the next 6 months, she'll become one of the most talked about guitarists in Brooklyn, then in New York, then nationally. Her technique will be studied, analyzed, praised for its combination of traditional blues sensibility and contemporary innovation. She'll sign a record deal, will tour, will achieve the success she's always wanted. But she'll also start having dreams about crossroads. She'll start seeing shadows that don't quite match the objects casting them. She'll start drinking more, sleeping less, feeling like something is watching her, waiting for her, counting down to a moment she can sense approaching but can't identify. And when she plays Crossroad Blues, which she'll do at every show, which will become her signature song, the way it was Robert Johnson's signature song, she'll hear the whisper, always the whisper. Growing louder with each performance, more insistent, more demanding, reminding her that talent comes from somewhere, that excellence has a source, that nothing is truly free even when you didn't consciously agree to pay for it. 5 years from now, she'll die in circumstances that are suspicious but not quite criminal. An overdose, the official report will say, accidental, tragic. One more musician destroyed by the pressures of fame and the availability of substances that promise relief but deliver only temporary escape. But the people who were close to her, the ones who heard her talk in her increasingly rare, lucid moments, will know it wasn't accidental. Will know she was running from something, hiding from something, trying to escape a bargain she didn't remember making, but couldn't deny existed. Her recordings will remain, and in those recordings, if you listen carefully, you'll hear it, the whisper. The same one that's in Robert Johnson's recordings, transmitted across decades, propagating through anyone who hears the invitation and acts on it, who demonstrates their willingness to trade tomorrow for today, security for excellence, life for legend. This is the true legacy of Crossroad Blues. Not just the music, though the music is foundation and framework, but the whisper, the invitation, the ongoing transaction that continues to seek new participants, new victims, new volunteers for a bargain that offers everything and costs everything. Robert Johnson went to the Crossroads 87 years ago and came back transformed. But the transformation didn't end with him. It's still happening. Still reaching out through recordings that have transcended their physical medium to become something else, something that lives in the space between sound and silence, between music and message, between art and transaction. The whisper continues. It will always continue. That's the nature of Crossroads bargains, of deals made in darkness, of transactions where the terms aren't written down, because they don't need to be, because they're encoded in the thing itself, in the music, in the sound, in the silence that comes after. If you've listened this far, if you've heard the story and understood its implications, you might be wondering if you've heard the whisper yourself. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones, immune to the invitation, protected by indifference or skepticism, or simply not being desperate enough, not hungry enough, not willing enough to trade what you are for what you might become. Or maybe you have heard it. Maybe you've been hearing it all along, in every Robert Johnson recording you've ever listened to, in every blues song that cuts a little too deep, in every moment when music touches something inside you that shouldn't be accessible through ordinary means. Maybe you've already answered the question without realizing you were asked. Maybe the bargain is already complete, already binding, already counting down to its inevitable conclusion. There's no way to know for certain. That's part of the design, part of the elegance of the transaction. Crossroads bargains don't announce themselves with fanfare and paperwork. They happen in the margins, in the whispers, in the moments when you're not quite paying attention, but something inside you is listening very carefully indeed. Robert Johnson died at 27, poisoned by a jealous husband, ending a life that burned too bright and too fast. But his music lives on, continues to play, continues to spread, continues to carry within it the whisper that started at a Mississippi crossroads and will never stop seeking new listeners, new players, new souls desperate enough or ambitious enough or foolish enough to say yes. So if you're listening to Crossroad Blues tonight, if you're wearing headphones in a quiet room, if you're paying attention to more than just the notes and the rhythms, be careful what you hear. Be careful what you acknowledge. Be careful what you agree to, even implicitly, even without conscious intention. Because some questions once heard demand answers. Some invitations once extended are difficult to decline. And some bargains, once initiated, continue long after the original participants are dust, using recordings and reverberations and whispers to find their next volunteers, their next victims, their next legends who will die young and be remembered forever. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Just like it was Robert Johnson's choice to stand at the crossroads that midnight in 1933. Just like it's been the choice of every listener since who heard the whisper and decided consciously or unconsciously to respond. If you enjoyed this journey through the shadowy legacy of Robert Johnson and the mysteries that surround Crossroad Blues, consider subscribing to Soul Chronicles. We explore the untold stories, the deeper truths, and the dark bargains behind music's greatest legends. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and share it with anyone who's ever wondered what price true genius demands. There are more stories to tell, more whispers to decode, more legends waiting in the darkness. Until next time, keep listening carefully. You never know what you might hear. The whisper continues, it's always continuing. And now you know what it says.